That, to me, is a queer agenda. Because it's big enough to actually understand that the majority of people in our community are not in this room and are not in the movements as they're now represented, and they never will be, because we never set an agenda that has the kind of issues that would bring people in, that come from very different kinds of understandings and life histories than mostly a white, middle-class, queer-identified LGBT movement. We've built a movement that excludes people, not because people from different kinds of communities don't also agree around some of those issues, but because we never shaped the agenda to prioritize questions of poverty, questions of building a queer left, ways of thinking about marriage that are broader than the way that same-sex marriage has been identified. I want to give you an example of a perfect, really a perfect, sadly, true story. In New York City, when the New York City anti-discrimination law was passed, it took like 20 years to pass the goddamn thing, and it really was an enormous amount of work, and it was done by many activists from many different kind of locations in New York City over many years. And in the anti-discrimination legislation, it names all the city agencies and what is expected from those city agencies in terms of anti-discrimination around LGBT people, but they forgot to include the welfare department. So the legislation didn't cover shelters, homeless people, or people on welfare. There was no anti-discrimination legislation that was explicitly understood around LGBT people. Why? Not because people were mean. They didn't think queer people were poor. Really, they didn't think there was any need to put it in that department, because why would you need that? The end result was that QEJ had to fight for 3 years for a variety of things, to get shelters to recognize same-sex partnerships without being formally in domestic partnership relationships. Think about it. When you go for a domestic partnership, you have to be able to prove you live together. You have to have a house. You have to have a phone bill that you share. If you're homeless, frankly, you don't have an address. That's what homeless means. So people couldn't have done that if they had wanted to do it. And so the shelters then would not allow people to enter if they were queer. They would not let people choose gender appropriate shelters. And they would not allow people to bring in family members that were chosen family members. So if you and your partner had kids, if one of you didn't have documentation, you couldn't bring in kids and be considered a same-sex family in the shelter system. And family systems are often one of the few places where there's anything at all helpful in what you need. So QEJ had to fight for 3 or 4 years. The city came back to us and said, okay, we'll amend the anti-discrimination legislation, but we'll just make it for queer people. We won't make it for people that are heterosexual but not married. We won't make it for anybody that's in any other kind of primary relationship. We'll just make it for queer people. No, actually, I don't think so. We didn't do this much work to have you decide that you're going to privilege us at other people's expense. So it took another 1.5 years to try and fight through with the shelter systems to get them to recognize same-sex families, partnering, a variety of ways of partnering, and gender identity outside of homosexuality, because that's what they thought, is that all people that were gender non-conforming had to be automatically be gay. Aren't they? All. Those are painful conversations to have, but it actually made an enormous difference. And QEJ organized the first contingent of poor people to march in Gay Pride in New York City. And it's one of the most amazing events because we go to all the shelters and pick up folks that are queer identified, and they march in a contingency of queer poverty people. And it's hundreds of people that come from the shelters to march in Gay Pride, and they've never participated in it before. So, you know, when you're thinking about like what that reshaping looks like, turns out really different people participate because you build a different kind of agenda. I want to end by saying what I mean by vision, because I think often there's a confusion about social justice work as though the reason that you do social justice work is driven by anger. Now, I've been angry myself a few times. I don't think anger is a bad thing. But anger is not something you can sustain over time. If you're permanently mad, probably you're not going to be a person that's very approachable. Anger may propel you to become an activist because there's something that's really unacceptable to you, or a range of things that's really unacceptable to you, but it won't keep you there. You can't stay an activist for 30 years because you're mad. You can't lose the anger, but it can't be the engine that drives your car. It can't be. It will burn you out, and it will make you a person that's very hard to work with, in my experience. You have very little give and take when you're really pissed, and it's hard to figure out how to build a movement when the anger that you have for what's being done is the only thing that is an appropriate conversation. But it also means, I think, to have a vision is to actually be willing to talk about things that are very hard to talk about. And I don't mean personal feelings, I mean capitalism. I mean, when profit frames human possibility, certain things result from that. That's a conversation that we have to have with people. That's not a conversation that's abstract. My parents couldn't afford to do anything but have anything but the lives that they led. That is not acceptable to me, that people could have their lives predetermined by whether or not they had money. That's not okay with me. That is not what I think human possibility and human capacity reflects, is profit. You might make money, you get to go to school. You? I don't think so. So forget you. Doesn't matter whether you're smart. You don't get to go. And you don't get health care. Because frankly, you're too poor and you're a problem. That is not an acceptable way to frame an agenda for human possibility. And vision, I think, is driven by the hope for a future that's based on a kind of value that says that we can imagine a way to live that is not how we live right now. That the way that we see things and the way people are hurt, the way that choices are made, the way that we actually are framed or forced to live is not the alternative we want people to have to face in the future. It's not what we wanted for ourselves, and it's not what we want for the people we love, and it's not what we want for the people that are coming behind us. It is unacceptable to have people limited and broken in their lives because they don't have enough to be able to eat. Hunger is one of the most horrifying and completely resolvable issues in the world. No one should be hungry. No one. No one should not have adequate health care. No one should not have the capacity for education. No one should not have a place to live. Period. Period. No question. Period. Vision is about saying what it is you hope for the future. Because people actually are fed with hope. Social justice rests on hope, not just anger. If we can't make an argument for the possibility of human beauty being the thing that determines human outcome, then people won't join us. We won't have the ability to transform the world because people won't stake their lives on it. And activism, I think, is staking their life on the possibility of a world different than the one you find yourself in. My own history is the thing that gave me that vision, precisely because I wanted to remember it rather than forget it. And it is the thing that I think is the possibility for us doing social justice work. That is hard work, it's lifetime work, it's not a semester. It's about doing it again and again and again. And if we don't draw on a place in our own hearts where we believe in the possibility of human connection and human joy, then we frame our agenda with a diminished capacity. We don't give ourselves hope, and we don't give other people hope. And if we don't do that, then people have no place to go for it. They have no place to find it. So the question to me of vision is fundamental to all the other issues that I've talked about tonight, because I think when you're doing social justice transformative work, you have to frame that work with the possibility of joy and capacity. And if you don't, people don't risk everything in order to make that choice. I believe that that's the critical piece. It's what I've done for 30 years, and I've been blessed to do it. And it's really what I want to talk with people here about, because when times are so hard economically, it's very difficult to frame hope as part of what you talk about. And yet, I think if we don't, people won't sign on, will not resist, will not stand up, will not make a difference, because they can't find a place in their own lives to believe that something different is possible. That is what a diminished vision does to you. You don't think there are any choices. And because you think there are no choices for you, you think there are no choices for anybody else. So I want to end just by saying that, and by saying that I think the work that you're doing here is critically important, and you need to value that work and see that this work is precisely that kind of agenda of making a difference in your lives and in other people's lives. Because what it says is, it's not acceptable to me to have things broken that I believe in. So I want to thank you for inviting me, and I want to have questions and answers.